Last summer, my family and I went on vacation to a secluded beach in Greece. The crystal clear waters and golden sands were a perfect escape from our busy lives. We rented a small villa near the shore, where the waves gently lapped at the beach, creating a soothing soundtrack to our days. One evening, just before sunset, we were already in bed, excited for the next day's beach adventures, when something strange happened. A man, who looked like an employee from the nearby restaurant, started knocking on our door very strongly. It was late at night, and I tried to ignore him, hoping he would stop. But he continued for a long time. Curiosity and concern got the better of me, so I peeked through the window. To my horror, I noticed the man was not knocking with his hands. He was hitting our door with his head. At that moment, I realized something was terribly wrong. I asked if he was okay, but he didn't reply. He kept banging his head against the door, each impact more disturbing than the last. I decided to open the door, hoping to talk to him and perhaps help. But as soon as the door opened, the man threw himself on the floor and began hitting his head against it. He seemed to be in some kind of trance, oblivious to my words and attempts to help him. Terrified, I called the police. When the officers arrived and tried to assist him, the man suddenly pulled a knife and tried to attack them. The officers swiftly subdued him and arrested him. Fortunately, no one was hurt. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. If I had tried to touch him alone without the police there, he might have pulled the knife on me and hurt me in front of my family. The incident left a dark shadow over our vacation, a chilling reminder of how quickly a situation can turn dangerous. It was 1968, and I was just 8 years old. My two big brothers and I had a cherished ritual of fishing at the river, a 20-minute walk from our house. Fishing was more than a pastime, it was a lifeline. We were poor, and not every night did we have food on our table. Bringing home fish to see our mother's face light up with joy was the biggest reward for us. One particular day, circumstances forced us to fish at night. My brothers often worked with my uncle during the day, so I had to wait for them. That evening, they arrived home around 8 p.m., and we set off on our fishing adventure under the cloak of darkness. When we reached the river, we built a fire to ward off the chill in the air. With everything prepared, we began fishing, eager for a good catch. About 10 minutes into our endeavor, strange things began to unfold. The water started moving in a peculiar manner, unlike anything we'd seen before. We initially thought it was some animal stirring below the surface. Then, a strong wind erupted out of nowhere, thrashing the trees violently. Leaves swirled around us and dust clouded our faces. The wind destroyed our fire, scattering the burning wood across the site. But the strangest part was what we saw next. As we looked at the river, a foggy figure emerged, appearing to float above the water. It looked like a man and a woman, locked in an embrace, as if they were sailing through the mist. Though I couldn't see their faces clearly, it felt as though they were hugging each other in fear. We were frozen in terror, our fishing rods forgotten at our feet. Then, panic took over, and we fled, running home without exchanging a single word. When we burst through the door, our mother rushed to us, her face etched with concern. We recounted our eerie encounter, our words tumbling out in a frantic rush. She tried to calm us, assuring us it was over, and tucked us into bed with soothing words. The next morning, curiosity drove us back to the river to retrieve our fishing rods and assess the damage the wind had caused. To our shock, everything was intact. The site was serene and undisturbed, as if the previous night had never happened. The trees stood tall and unscathed. Our fire pit was exactly where we had built it, and our fishing rods lay undisturbed. It was as though the entire experience had been a collective hallucination. To this day, my brothers and I can't explain what happened that night. The memory of those ghostly figures and the sudden, inexplicable chaos haunts us. After that, we only ever went fishing during the day, unwilling to tempt whatever dark forces might lurk by the river after sundown. I often go camping with my girlfriend and her cousin in the middle of the woods. We love enjoying nature and looking at the stars far away from civilization and electronics. One particular night, we were lying on the ground, watching the stars and hoping for a shooting star when we heard a noise from the woods. It sounded like something shaking the bushes around. We thought it might be an animal, so we didn't care much. But suddenly, we heard a voice say, "Hey you!" All of us sat up at the same time, looking at each other and asking if we had heard the same thing. We stayed silent for a few seconds until we heard it again. "Hey you." The voice was sharp, and it didn't feel human, but the words were so clear. We kept hearing the bushes moving, and from time to time, we heard the same sound, "Hey you." After a minute, a fox jumped right in front of us, staring at us like it needed help or something. We were so scared, we didn't know what to do, and I wasn't sure if it might attack us. My girlfriend's cousin threw one of the snacks she had far away, and the fox followed it immediately, running off. After a few seconds, we heard, "Hey you" again. We figured the fox was making these sounds, which was weird because it truly sounded like it was saying, "Hey you." We quickly retreated to our tents, hoping the fox wouldn't return. The next morning, we packed up and left early, still unnerved by the strange encounter. The memory of that night lingered with us, a reminder of how even the most familiar places in nature can hold unexpected and eerie surprises. When I was 14, my family decided to spend the summer at an old cabin deep in the woods, a place my grandfather had inherited. It was a rustic, weather-worn structure, surrounded by dense forest, far from the nearest town. My parents thought it would be a great way to escape the hustle and bustle of city life and reconnect with nature. I wasn't as enthusiastic, but I figured it would be an adventure. One night, after we had settled in, I decided to explore the woods a bit. My parents had warned me not to go too far, but curiosity got the better of me. I walked deeper and deeper into the forest, the light from my flashlight casting long, dancing shadows among the trees. After about an hour, I stumbled upon an old well, hidden behind a tangle of overgrown bushes. It looked ancient, with moss-covered stones and a rusted metal crank. As I peered into its dark depths, I felt a chill run down my spine. There was something unsettling about it, something that made me want to turn back and run home. Just as I was about to leave, I heard someone begging for help deep inside the well. It was a faint, desperate voice echoing up from the darkness.
"Help me, please!"
The voice pleaded over and over. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried speaking back, asking who he was, but there was no response, just the same haunting cries for help.
"Hey, please, help me!"
Terrified, I turned and ran back to the cabin as fast as I could. When I burst through the door, my parents were startled by my pale, frightened face. I told them what had happened, but they dismissed it as my imagination running wild. They tried to reassure me that no one could be trapped in an old, abandoned well. I didn't sleep well that night, haunted by the cries for help and the feeling that someone was still out there, desperate and alone. The next morning, I couldn't stop talking about what I had heard. My father, seeing how disturbed I was, decided to go investigate the well. We walked back through the woods, my heart racing with a mix of fear and anticipation. When we reached the well, he peered inside and called out, but there was nothing. No voice, no cries for help, just an eerie silence. Despite my father's reassurance that nothing was there, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled over me. I knew what I had heard was real. To this day, I'm sure of it. The memory of those desperate pleas for help still haunts me, and I can't forget the sense of terror that gripped me that night by the old well. When I was 10, my family moved to a small countryside town. Our new house, an old Victorian-style home, had creaky wooden floors and an overgrown garden. Behind it, hidden by a grove of trees, lay an abandoned playground. The rusty swings and faded merry-go-round gave the place an eerie feel, but it intrigued me despite my parents' warnings to stay away. One late afternoon, curiosity got the best of me. I sneaked out and made my way through the underbrush to the playground. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth. As I stepped onto the cracked pavement, a shiver ran down my spine. I wandered around, inspecting the old equipment. The swings swayed gently, their chains clinking softly. As I sat on the merry-go-round, I heard a faint giggle, childlike and haunting. I looked around but saw no one. The laughter came again, closer this time. My heart pounded as I scanned the area. Then I saw her, a little girl, no older than 6, in a tattered white dress with long, tangled curls. "Hi," I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. "What's your name?" She giggled again, running towards the old slide. I followed, intrigued and scared. As I approached, she climbed the steps and disappeared. When I reached the slide, she was gone. Confused, I decided to head home. As I turned, I noticed the slide, which had been rusty, now looked brand new. The metal gleamed in the sunlight, the paint fresh and vibrant. I hurried back and told my parents. They exchanged worried glances and explained the playground had been abandoned for decades after a tragic accident claimed several children's lives. People believed it was haunted, which was why it had decayed. Despite their warnings, I felt compelled to return. The next day, the playground looked old and abandoned again. I spent hours calling out for the girl, but saw nothing. Just as I was about to give up, I heard the giggle again. She stood by the swings, smiling sadly before disappearing. I never saw the girl again, but I often heard her laughter echoing through the trees. The playground remained a place of mystery, a reminder of lost lives. I can't explain what I saw, but I know the spirits of the past still linger, waiting to be remembered.